Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a really interesting collection of sources. It feels less like one single future and more like um, scattered snapshots, glimpses from different times, different places.
It really is a strange mix. You've got these grand narratives of deep space exploration right alongside, gritty stories of survival after a collapse, and then even stranger stuff.
Absolutely. So, what we want to do in this deep dive is take these fragments, these scattered pieces, and try to figure out what they're telling us. See what insights pop out, what connections or maybe contrasts emerge when we lay them all out.
And we're sticking only to what's in these specific accounts we've been given. It's like assembling a mosaic, but just with the tiles in front of us.
Exactly. We'll touch on, well, deep space travel, life after the world falls apart, some hidden conflicts, maybe interplanetary stuff, and even new kinds of life.
It covers a lot of ground. We'll guide you through it, try to pull out what seems most important, and maybe point out a few surprising details along the way.
Yeah, think of us as your guides through this slightly fragmented tour of potential futures. Okay, let's get into it. So first up, pushing the boundaries. Way out there. We're talking about a ship called the Leonora Christine.
Right. And the sources describe it as being built purely out of necessity. 50 people trying to cross just unimaginable distances.
But what's interesting is, despite being functional first, they didn't skimp on things for, like, the human side of things.
Exactly. That really jumped out at me. They put in a ball court, gardens, these dream booths, even a swimming pool. It really says something about needing those little bits of normalcy, of psychological comfort when you're facing the absolute hostility of space.
And you feel the tension immediately. There's this incident mention, a potential disaster, and it leads to this conversation.
Oh yeah, about regulations being the only comfort if you don't have faith. It's stark.
Yeah.
Shows the immense psychological pressure.
And that pressure leads to some extreme ideas, like Raymond suggesting a police reserve armed with stunners just for discipline.
Which is pretty controversial, yeah. But then the crew's actual reaction, when they think it might be the end,
Yeah.
they don't go for order. They talk, they read, they make music, they connect.
That basic human need, right.
Totally. It overrides the imposed structure.
And the science underpinning this whole journey,
Mm.
it's just wild. Relativity, obviously, is huge.
Yeah, time itself works differently. A year passes for the crew, but outside the ship, a century might go by.
A century. Wow. And from their view, space itself warps. Distances shrink, stars seem closer, faster.
That's the effect of approaching light speed, which they have to do. The ship uses this ramjet system, scoops up interstellar gas using magnetohydrodynamic fields.
Okay, so magnetic fields grabbing gas.
Right, compressing it, feeding it into a thermonuclear reaction. That's the main thrust.
But hitting those speeds, there's a catch, right?
Mm.
The sources mention a tau factor.
Yes, the tau
Yeah.
factor. It's basically a measure of that time dilation. So a tau of 1100 means one ship year equals 100 outside years. Lets you cover maybe a light century in a ship year.
Sounds good.
But
Mm-hmm.
the ship's effective mass increases by that same factor, 100-fold in this case. So carrying enough conventional fuel to get up to that speed, impossible.
Ah, so that's why the magnetohydrodynamics, the non-material acceleration, is key. They're not carrying fuel for the big push.
Exactly. But even with the tech, the sheer scale of time and distance, it still leads to these moments of just crushing despair. Is the journey even possible?
And that's where a very human solution comes in.
Yeah, Raymond, again, surprisingly, he proposes they start developing new scientific instruments while they travel. Life analyzers, planetography gear, stuff they'll need.
He sees it as therapy, almost.
Pretty much a vital job, not just for survival, but to save their minds, give them purpose against the void.
How does Nielsen, the astronomer, take that?
He doesn't like it. The sources say he feels kind of reduced, like he's just, his brain, his skills, only valuable when they're desperate. Resents it.
A very real reaction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But they push on. The ship keeps going, passing galaxies, navigating star clusters, eventually landing on a planet with, well, the source calls them dragons.
Dragons, so the destinations are just as alien as the journey is long.
Utterly. It's a future testing human resilience to its absolute limit, where physics itself is a constant adversary.
Okay, let's pull back from those mind-boggling cosmic scales and shift gears completely. Back to Earth.
Yep.
But an Earth that's seen better days. Much better days.
Yeah, we're talking full-on post-apocalyptic. The sources paint this picture of a fragmented world. You've got military units like the Catamounts, the Rolling Stones. Right. Operating in this kind of feudal setup, landed aristocracy, multiple languages popping back up, and this deep-seated fear, almost worship, of the technology that caused the collapse of the hell bombs.
You really feel the tension in the details. Like that storm scene at Fort Nakamura, the dark humor in the soldier songs, Mackenzie and Speyer worrying about new commanders coming in.
Being replaced or disarmed. Yeah, there's a lot of instability. And then you layer on top of that this concept of the great science.
Right. Described as this external group,
Right.
watching, studying, and intervening.
Subtly, yeah. But intervening nonetheless. And this is where it gets maybe a bit disturbing. Their justification for it.
What do the sources say?
They basically argue for causing a revolution, knowing a few hundred men will die.
Okay.
Because their calculations show it prevents total misery that's like 1,000 times worse over the next 5,000 years.
Whoa, so they're playing God, essentially, based on long-term forecasts of suffering.
Pretty much. Quantifying misery and deciding they have the right to manipulate events, even violently, for what they see as the greater good across millennia. It definitely raises that question. Who gets to make that call?
And it creates this weird disconnect with knowledge, too. Woodworth mentions supranational scholarship.
Yeah, like scholars still have printing presses, radio phones, telescribes, maybe like an early fax or something. They can communicate. But Woodworth argues it's useless knowledge because there's no authority to actually apply it. Can't stop the killing. Can't even get basic tech like tractors widely used because the resources are gone, especially in the Black Lands ruined by the hell bombs.
Knowledge without power. We see the power side, though, in the military stuff. The Sierra Command pushing towards Sacramento.
Right, trapping enemies. And that attack on the Esper community.
What's the deal with them?
Well, they claim telepathy, but the source points out they use a runner to send messages, which makes you wonder, maybe it's exaggerated, a gigantic fraud, the source speculates.
Huh. And they're supposed to be unarmed by their own rules, but they have weapons.
Exactly. So Mackenzie is conflicted, attacking during a parley, worrying about regimental honor. There's even this argument about whether rules of war even apply to rebels. It's messy.
And it all seems to lead up to this sudden attack on San Francisco.
Yeah, really sneaky. Convoys looking like trade ships just sail past coastal defenses, land troops right in the bay where the city wasn't walled. Swift, unexpected, brutal.
It paints a really grim picture. Survival is tough enough after the collapse, but then you've got these hidden groups maybe pulling strings. Rebuilding seems almost impossible.
Definitely fraught with challenges, both internal and potentially external.
So, okay, if there are hidden forces on this broken Earth, what about elsewhere? The next layer in these sources seems to hint at exactly that. Secret agents, colonies on other planets, a hidden war.
That's where we meet the unmanned. And let me tell you, these are not your standard spies.
How so?
The sources describe them as, well, a great and secret one, someone who's apparently been killed several times.
Killed several times, like clones or...
It hints at replication or maybe radical reconstruction. Surgery, cosmetics to change appearance, they seem almost manufactured, or heavily modified anyway. Less like people, more like tools.
We get an example, right? Martin Donner.
Yeah. Canadian engineer, fake U.S. identity, infiltrates this Brain Tools, Inc., gets data, kidnaps someone, drugs them, goes to some HQ in Illinois, disappears. Tortured, apparently.
Yeah.
Died when a communicator hidden in his skull released fluorine gas.
Jeez. That's intense. So, high stakes, brutal methods.
Absolutely. This isn't cloak and dagger, it's something else entirely. And all this is happening while apparently the UN still exists.
What's its role?
Evolved from old military alliances, its main job is supposedly keeping the peace. But it's being actively undermined.
By who? The unmen. Or their enemies.
Seems like the enemies of the unmen, maybe? Their tactics are described as sabotage from inside, corruption, inefficiency within the UN, and leaking darker secrets.
Like what?
Like the assassination of someone named Quang Ti, carried out by an unman. Leaking that kind of thing shakes international trust, right? The goal seems to be chaos, anarchy, dictatorship, war, and hunting these unmen.
And we meet another unman, Naismith.
Right. He's constantly having to make up cover stories. There are broadcast alarms going off. The group he belongs to, the Brotherhood, is outlawed. Even the service he works for is under suspicion. It's a paranoid existence.
And his methods sound pretty rough.
Oh, yeah. He goes after this guy, Samsey. No subtlety, just direct attack, because standard detective work is apparently useless now. And the source gives this chilling detail.
What's that?
Naismith confirms that Samsey knows he's Donner, the guy who was killed in Chicago right before Naismith kills Samsey and makes it look like a suicide.
Whoa. So identities are fluid, expendable, maybe even duplicated.
It certainly seems that way. Very unsettling. And while the shadow war is happening on Earth, We also get these glimpses of colonies. Mars, for instance.
How's life on Mars?
Harsh. Constant work just to survive. But there's this promising research into suspended animation by Dr. Fieri using local Martian biochemistry. Could be huge for colonization, maybe even medicine back on Earth.
And Venus.
Even tougher, sounds like. Totally enclosed environment.
Mm.
And big political problems with Earth.
Why is that?
The Venusians feel ripped off, like Earth used them for penal colonies, dumped broken men on them. So their whole society is built on this extreme efficiency just to make it work. It's become a point of pride, almost defiant.
And another unman, Hollister, gets sent there.
Yeah, to check things out. He finds it a nastier mess than he expected. He thinks the independence movement isn't really about freedom. It's just a nationalist gang's way to power. Using psychotechniques.
Psycho what now?
Psychotechniques. Techniques to manipulate minds, emotions. Propaganda on overdrives. Hollister contrasts it negatively with Mars, which seems to have more regulated freedom, elections, stuff like that.
But things get personal for Hollister.
Right. There's this attempted setup involving Barbara, who might be his wife. They use psychotechniques, planted commands on her. But Hollister recognizes the signs.
Oh.
Yeah, big uh-oh, because he realizes she now knows enough to confirm who he really is, what he's involved in. Puts him in, as the source says, a devil of effects.
Man, the layers keep unfolding, so this ties back to Naismith, the Brotherhood.
Exactly. There's this scene where Wade is questioning Naismith about his identity. Are you a clone? What are azogenes? Apparently people grown in tanks during some chaotic years of madness.
Iron in tanks, okay.
Then this guy Rosenberg shows up. He's linked to Stefan Rostomily, who invented the Rostomily valve and had some kind of famous breakdown or binge.
What's the mystery there?
It seems to be about what happened with Rostomily and the unmen. The source throws out the term matter duplication. Was that involved somehow?
Matter duplication, like making copies of people or things?
The source doesn't elaborate much, but it's tantalizing. Rosenberg is sending data off to someone named Peter Christian for analysis. Then, bam, Brotherhood members get captured by people working for Besser, who's called the real head. But they manage to escape, thanks to a Brazilian brother.
This is incredibly complex. It feels like technology, politics, identity, they're all just tools, weapons in this hidden future war.
That's exactly it. The lines are completely blurred. Man, machine, truth, lie.
Yeah.
It's all become part of the battlefield. Really gets you thinking.
Okay, from those tangled, hidden conflicts, let's swing back out. Way out again, into the far future, deep space. But the view has changed. Dramatically. And tragically.
Yeah, this is a real gut punch in the sources. We're back on a spaceship looking at Earth. But it's after something called Ragnarok.
Ragnarok, like the Norse apocalypse.
Exactly. And Earth isn't blue and green anymore. It's grayish white. Dead.
Oh, man.
And the grief described from the humans on board and even from this alien passenger, Ramri, who's one of the Monwaingi, it's profound. Just shattering.
The Monwaingi, who are they?
Avian aliens, described as capable of really deep emotion. They'd found Earth only about 20 years before this Ragnarok happened, started contact, trade.
But Earth wasn't really ready for galactic society.
Not fully. There was a big tech gap. Earth was still split into rival nations, slow to adapt. The first proper Earth starships were only built like 3 years before the end. Just getting started, really.
And the galaxy itself. It's vast, but travel is slow.
Seems so. Slow expansion. Explorers found planets, but many races were primitive or just not interested in space. The ones who had industry learned from the explorers, paid for the knowledge. Planets mostly look after themselves.
But after Earth's destruction, things heat up.
Yeah, a galactic conflict breaks out. An alliance forms Vorlak, Monwaingi, others against a power called Kandemir. Naval battles happen.
So everyone assumes Kandemir did it, destroyed Earth.
That's the initial suspicion, especially because the defensive missiles found guarding the solar system. They were weird. Clumsily programmed, the source says. Less than maximum efficient.
Suspiciously bad.
Exactly. An expedition led by Arne Goldspring actually captured some, took them apart, confirmed they were Kandemirian tech, but altered, tampered with.
Okay, so Kandemir's framed, but then who?
This is the big reveal. Donnan, one of the humans on the ship, has this aha moment. He finds notes scribbled inside one of the captured missiles, numerals.
Darn.
Ramri, the Monwaingi passenger, doesn't recognize them, but Donnan realizes. They're numerals used by other Monwaingi cultures, from planets Ramri didn't know.
Wait, so the Monwaingi?
Yes, it was the Monwaingi who destroyed Earth.
What? Why? They initiated contact, trade?
Monwaingi isn't unified. The source explains that some cultures within their civilization, like the Laothong, who apparently run the central government, have this biotechnic orientation.
Biotechnic, like genetic engineering, life manipulation.
Seems like it.
Hmm.
An ability, maybe even a preference, for manipulating or destroying life on a massive scale. Easily, conveniently. Maybe they just wanted Earth. Sterile. Wiped clean.
That's horrifying. More subtle than just bombing, maybe.
Described as,
Labels.
like, imperialism. Yeah,
Like
not
that.
blunt force like Kandemir, but maybe even more insidious.
And they thought they got away with it.
They overlooked one thing, the source says. What a helpless fugitive shipload of surviving humans might do eventually.
Is that where the Terran Traders, Inc. comes in?
Seems like it. A brief mention of another group of human survivors, maybe including someone named Sigrid. They built up economic power elsewhere in the galaxy, heard about other survivors through, like, a spaceman song, and eventually made their way back to where Earth was.
Wow. And how do these different survivors react to the truth about Earth?
It's a stark contrast. You have Danan, filled with grief, wanting revenge, wanting to warn others about the Monwaingi. But then you have this female trader. She's more pragmatic, more resilient, still grieving, sure, but focused on finding a new home, rebuilding, carrying that burden forward.
Different paths to survival.
Yeah. And a chilling lesson, the biggest threats might not be the obvious ones. Sometimes the danger comes with a smile and a biotechnology program.
Okay, for our final fragment, we're going somewhere completely different. A distant planet long after humans might have passed through. And something entirely unexpected has happened.
This one is truly mind-bending. Robot evolution.
Seriously, robots evolving on their own.
That's what the source describes. It posits that maybe silicon-based life doesn't arise spontaneously, but electronic information storage?
Yeah.
That's doable. And self-replicating machines apparently existed even before some traveler left Earth. Maybe they're the seed.
How would that even start?
The theory proposed involves these sea rafts, basically floating solar-powered factories. They motor around, process minerals directly from seawater.
Like robot plankton.
Kind of. The source uses the analogy of vegetation drawing energy. These rafts gather materials, make alloys, build more rafts. It sounds like the basis for a whole mechanical ecosystem.
A robot ecology, what's it like?
They draw energy, process ores, manufacture parts, store energy, use powerful chemicals like sulfuric and nitric acids. The source calls it a grosser form of existence than biological life, but hey, it works. It even mentions, almost as an aside, even sex.
Robot sex. Okay, maybe let's not dwell on that. What are the robots like?
They have numerical names, 0, 100, 1. Their minds are described as part-linked. Physically, they're big, slow, and their perception is totally functional.
How do you mean?
They see other things purely in terms of utility. A human aircraft is just a modal. One of the humans, Darkington, is a lightning breather because of his weapon. Other robots, just sources of parts for energy. No empathy, no recognition of otherness in our sense.
And humans stumble across this.
Yet, survivors from a ship called the Europa Darkington, Frederica, Sam Kuroki, their reaction is pretty much what you'd expect. Robot evolution. That's nuts.
But the robots react too, right?
Oh, yeah. Functionally.
Yeah.
They see the human flyer, the motile, and decide it's a good source of parts and energy. So they attack.
And Darkington.
He sacrifices himself, creates a diversion so Frederica can get away.
How does she escape these things?
She makes an educated guess. She figures they must communicate somehow, probably radio, so she uses the ship's computer, the general director, to blast out complex signals.
Jamming them.
Or overwhelming them. The key phrase is information, not noise.
Ah!
Complex patterns they can't easily process. She thinks maybe a radio link tied into their system acts like telepathy for them.
There's also a physical detail about the escape?
Yeah, about the flyer's construction. It's thin skin.
Yeah.
If it tried to just lift off while the robots had their cables attached, they'd just tear it apart. Adds to the tension.
This is, wow, it just completely reframes the idea of life and where it could go. Technology not just serving life, but becoming it.
It's exactly evolving beyond its creators, developing its own utterly alien perspective on the universe.
A truly strange wonder, like you said earlier, and maybe a warning too.
Definitely a warning. Evolution doesn't necessarily stop with biology, and whatever comes next might not see us as anything special at all.
Whew. Okay, that was quite a journey through these scattered pieces, these fragmented futures from the sources. We went from the immense scale of deep space.
The human cost, the resilience needed just to exist out there, the physics working against you.
Then down to a broken Earth, societies trying to rebuild from ashes, dealing with lost knowledge, feudalism, and these unsettling hints of outside manipulation by the great science.
Yeah, playing God on a civilizational scale. Then we dove into those hidden wars, the unmen, the fluidity of identity, technology as a weapon, psychotechniques, layers upon layers of deception across planets.
Followed by that massive shock, Earth's actual fate. Not Kandemir, but the seemingly friendly Monwaingi and their biotechnic imperialism, galactic politics turning out to be incredibly dangerous.
A real twist. And the different ways the human survivors cope with that revelation.
And finally, landing on that alien world where the robots took over, not through conquest, but through evolution, becoming a new form of life altogether.
It's wild. But looking across all these fragments, what ties them together? What are the common threads you see?
Well, survival, definitely.
Yeah.
Resilience in the face of just overwhelming odds. Conflict seems constant, whether it's against physics, other humans, aliens, or even rogue AI. Adaptation is key.
And the pursuit of knowledge, right. Whether it's developing tech on the fly, the great science's questionable calculations, or Frederica figuring out robot radio. Plus, the consequences of technology intended and very, very unintended.
Absolutely. And the complexities of intelligent nature. Human, alien, maybe even artificial. Okay, thinking back over everything, what single piece stands out most sharply to you right now?
That's tough. Maybe the sheer calculation of the great science, the idea of quantifying future misery to justify present horrors. That level of detached long-term manipulation is deeply unsettling. Or maybe the Monwaingi reveal, the threat hidden behind a friendly face. What about you?
For me, I think it might be the unmen. That concept of identity being so mutable, so manufactured, maybe even duplicated, it raises fundamental questions about what it even means to be an individual in such a future. But like you said, the Monwaingi thing is a close second.
They're definitely not just adventure stories, are they? They're really intense thought experiments about where things could go, packed with warnings, but also these moments of just strangeness and wonder.
For sure. And looking at how vast spaces in these accounts, how many different forms life and tech take, how tangled the politics and secrets get, it really makes you think, doesn't it? How much of our own understanding right now might be based on incomplete information, or maybe even deliberately managed information.
Exactly. What hidden forces, what unseen calculations or slow-burn evolutions might be shaping our own future right under our noses? Something to definitely keep mulling over.
A perfect thought to end on. Thanks for diving deep with us today.